Hey guys, and welcome to Write Bites, a series of 10-minute episodes on writing, marketing, and freelancing. In this episode, I'm going to answer the question, what should you name your freelance business?
You can refer to me as Mr. Shroot.
That's your name? Mr. Poop?
Shroot. Mr. Shroot.
Sure, Mr. Poop.
Now, there's two typical options that most writers are considering when they are going about naming their business. The first option is to name it after their own personal name, like I have. If you look me up anywhere online, I'm under the Jacob McMillan brand. Or alternatively, you can come up with your own brand name from scratch. Some examples of this include business casual copywriting, men with pens, copycat, very good copy. Anything that you can come up with doesn't even need to have something about writing or copy in it, but if you come up with a brand from scratch, that is kind of the other option available to you. And when you're thinking about which one of these to choose, there's some pros and cons to each one. So that's what we're going to cover in this video. And I'm also going to give you kind of my personal opinion on what I think is really objectively the better choice for most copywriters. So typically, the simplest option when you're first launching a copywriting business is, of course, to name your brand after your own personal name. And there are some significant advantages to going this route. The first one is that you are building your own personal brand. And the significance here is that any amount of time you spend building your own brand, building a brand attached to your name, is never truly going to be lost. So for example, if you choose to completely pivot down the road and go in an entirely different direction, you don't lose all that work that you've put into branding yourself and building your own personal brand, because it's your own personal brand. It's around you. You didn't disappear. You may have taken a different direction. You may be working on a different business, but the people who are connected to you are connected to you personally, regardless of the specific task or career or business that you are running. Which isn't quite the same if you spend, 5 years building a dedicated kind of, separate brand. For example, say you came up with a copy team, something super generic that hopefully no one else has named there. So whatever I say in this example doesn't connect to anything. Let's say you named yourself Copy Team and you spend 5 years building the Copy Team brand, and then you decide that you want to go develop an e-commerce fashion line. And all of a sudden, all this work that you've put into building the Copy Team, if you aren't actively selling anything through the Copy Team anymore, most of that branding is now for nothing. Most of the followers to that brand, most of the work you've put getting that brand name around the web, once you stop operating that specific brand, or alternatively, even if you kept the same business but rebranded, you end up losing a lot on the way. So ultimately, that's kind of the advantage of the personal brand, is that any work you put into investing in a personal brand never disappears as long as you don't disappear. As long as it's still you, as long as you don't change your name or whatever, it's going to follow you and benefit you regardless of your pursuits for the rest of your life. So that's reason number one. And reason number two, kind of going in a very similar vein, is just that it's infinitely more flexible. If you pivot, if you change things, if you go in different directions, your personal brand can very easily adjust with you, because it's a little bit more built around you than purely about, the activity that you're doing. The other element to this as well is just kind of the concept of the name itself. Your name is your name. I don't know anyone who regrets their name or has branded around their own name who, 5 years later says, hey, I just really regret branding around my own name. I meet people on a monthly basis who tell me, Jacob, I hate the brand name that I came up with 3 years ago. It's so stupid. I don't know what I was thinking, but they feel stuck to it now for the reasons we just mentioned in point one. which is that, if they do pivot, if they do try to rebrand, they have to kind of say bye-bye to a lot of the work they've been doing over the previous year. So kind of the two parts there is, it stays with you, but then it's also flexible to move with you. So as you pivot, it can adjust with you. I've spent the last 8 years building my brand around copywriting. But if I were to pivot and, just go through and change my presence, say I wanted to do that same thing. Say I wanted to go open a fashion e-commerce retailer that was, branded around Jacob McMillan, or say I created a new brand around it, I could still kind of leverage the branding that I've done, the networking I've done, the audiences I've built to my personal brand in channeling things to that new brand. So it's just very flexible when it's around your name. It just lets you pivot more. It lets you take all that work you do and, channel it in whatever direction you want. And then the last point, and this might be the most important one, is that personal brands fit very well with the freelance business model. Freelancing is kind of filling this gap of providing really tailored and affordable help to businesses that maybe can't afford a large, faceless 50 team, 100 team, 1,000 team agency or firm. And there's a wide range in there, but when people are looking to hire a freelancer, they're usually looking for personalized help. They're looking for someone who's going to be with them on the project from the first conversation all the way through the end. If someone wants a faceless brand to work with and they're okay with being passed through, 10 different team members over the course of a project, there's lots of options like that for them. They don't necessarily they don't need a new option that a faceless brand via a solopreneur. It's usually when people are looking for a solopreneur and they're looking for a freelancer, they're wanting a more personalized experience, which fits very well with that personal brand. So those are kind of all the points for. I think the biggest kind of firsthand review feedback I can provide to you is what I mentioned earlier, just that I've literally never had someone come to me and say, I really regret branding around my own personal brand, where I very frequently have people tell me that they regret, branding around whatever brand name they had come up with, from scratch several years prior. So that said, there are some situations where you might want to go with a brand that you develop, create from scratch. And the first and probably the biggest one is that if you plan to scale past one-to-one freelancing, if your goal from the beginning is to build something bigger than yourself, then there's that's where the benefits of having that, non-personalized brand come into play. For example, say you want to build an agency, a larger agency with multiple professionals that's working with multiple companies. Well, then it maybe doesn't make as much sense to brand around your own name, because there's going to be situations where people come to your brand and never even work with you. They work with people on your staff. Or alternatively, if you're targeting some of those bigger clients, some of those, large companies, they want to work with a faceless large agency. They want to work with an agency that has the kind of standing and size to keep up with their needs. And so by kind of creating a brand that doesn't, you can still do that under your own brand. And if you are able to position yourself in a way that speaks to those companies, like it's not undoable through a personal brand. But there is some element of, just like people are going to associate a personal name brand with a personalized experience, people are going to tend to associate more of a company brand with more of a larger company experience. So there's kind of, again, this is not black and white, but that's just something to keep in mind. And alternatively, say you just plan on really hitting your lead acquisition hard, and getting your lead flow and your client flow to the point that it's more than you can handle yourself. Monetizing those excess leads that you can't work on yourself is quite hard. It might seem like, hey, I can just I could pass those off to another freelancer for a commission of the project. Sounds great. In practice, it's very hard to pass off a lead that came for you specifically to pass them off to another person. That's a challenge. That's not easy to do. It's hard to find a fit. It's hard to find someone who's going to close those leads at a high percentage. Similarly, if you were to, maybe just hire some writers to kind of white label through you, where you pass it to them but keep it under your name, you're still going to be worried about how that work reflects on you, and you're probably going to spend time editing the work, and that ends up taking a lot more time than you probably anticipate. So it just, if your plan is to scale past being a freelancer, might just be better to kind of create a, separate standalone brand name from the beginning. And kind of in a similar vein to that, the second point is if from the beginning, hey, I'm creating a business to sell it. I have an exit strategy in mind from the beginning, then same deal. It's very hard to sell a personal name branded business. Not impossible, but much more challenging. And then the last reason is just if you have a really common name, if you have a name that's just, it's just really common, lots of people have your exact first and last name. Or if you have a name where like one or two really already famous people have your same name, that's where you can start to run into some difficulties. If Googling your name pops up like 3 different mega famous people that have huge online presences, probably not the best choice to name brand, because you're always going to be competing with someone who's way ahead of you and has more name recognition. So in those 3 cases, essentially, if you're looking to scale, if you're looking to sell the business, if you have a really common or a name already owned by a famous person with a large online presence, might be better to create your own standalone brand name. Otherwise, I think the objectively better choice for most people is to brand themselves and name their business after themselves. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, hit them in the comments, and I will catch you guys in the next episode.